is the latest Steven Spielberg film starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep, so obviously there's some awards recognition going on for that film right now. And this movie is set in a time period where certain Pentagon papers that were very classified, like covering up a lot about the Vietnam War, have been released, and since it is out there, newspapers are trying to find all of these pages to print them out for the public to see. And this movie focuses on the Washington Post's Ben Bradlee and Katharine Graham, who are the main people at the Post trying to get these pages out to the public, while Nixon was, of course, threatening to sue the press for anything they print about these things. I was pretty certain that the next Steven Spielberg I'd be seeing was Ready Player One this year, but then all of a sudden, like, I don't even know when anymore, but Spielberg last year just started putting out stuff like, I am heading into production on the Post, like, right now! And so I became excited for the Post, because it is a Spielberg movie coming out in 2017. Like, of course, I'd be interested to see that, because he is still my favorite director. Sure, he's had ups, he's had some downs, but for the most part, he's made films that I enjoy and really, really, really love. And The Post is no exception to that. I really did enjoy this film, mainly because it is covering a subject matter that is very interesting to me. Now, obviously, I knew what the true story was, I knew what went down, but I was very interested for them to actually go into what was going on with the reporters, like what they have to do in order to get a story out there. And I was really fascinated by this movie because they definitely do go into detail as far as the legalities of certain things, the repercussions of what could happen if they print something, and what could happen with Nixon threatening to sue them, trying to get a source, trying to make sure that it's a source separated from another paper, a bunch of stuff that these reporters have to deal with as far as getting a story published, as well as actually printing it out and getting it out there before a certain deadline. Watching this movie, I actually grew a lot of respect for people who work for the news, at least, who actually have to go out there and do similar stuff to this in order to get stories and sources and all that junk. A lot of respect to that. And I think Spielberg did a really good job of getting you into the mindset of these reporters. Unfortunately, though, one of my flaws with this movie is that the first hour and 10 minutes or so, it is lacking a little bit of urgency that feels like there should be some there. Now, the last 30-40 minutes or so, that's when the urgency really cranks into high gear. That's when I was starting to sit on the edge of my seat a little bit, getting a little anxious, even though I knew the outcome. I've known the true story for a while now. I was still anxious to see the film because Spielberg was doing an excellent job as far as directing those sequences. So the last 30-40 minutes of the film, high in urgency, first hour or so, a little bit lacking in that field. Now, that's not a complete hindrance on the film. Some people could look at it as that. I'd say there's only a few moments where it kind of dragged for me, and it's mainly whenever they cut to Meryl Streep's character. Now, she's not bad in this movie, Meryl Streep, obviously. She's so good, it's kind of a cliche to say that she's so good, and this is definitely another role that feels like she could have done this in her sleep, but I think she did a really good job portraying Katharine Graham. She has to go through this arc where she kind of just inherited the Washington Post. She really still needs to prove herself as far as heading it. There are people out there that are kind of trying to take advantage of her position. So there is a nice arc for her at least, and it does overall pay off. But I'd say that whenever they cut away from the reporter stuff, because that was the stuff that I was really engaged with, the stuff with Tom Hanks' Ben Bradlee, who was very good in this film. Whenever they cut to him and his reporter team, I was really locked in and fascinated to see what they were going to do. And then they cut to Meryl Streep, and I was just kind of like, okay. Mainly because whenever she's not with them, she's doing something that is important because it's based on a true story, but it's not as interesting as the Washington Post stuff. Like, there's literally a scene in this movie where she's giving a really heartfelt monologue, and I found myself dozing off, and I caught myself doing it, and I was like, oh my god, I missed the majority of what she was saying. So I think those scenes could have just been improved a little bit. Nothing wrong with the performance or the way they wrote the character, just the scenes themselves just weren't as engaging as the rest of the stuff. But whenever she is with Tom Hanks as Ben Bradlee with these reporters, the movie gets really good. In fact, these two have really good chemistry with each other, mainly because they're in that kind of position of they're buddy-buddy with each other, they work for each other after all, but Ben Bradlee is also kind of like another guy who is trying to take advantage of the position just a little bit, only really thinking about what's in it for him at that moment without even considering what she has to lose. So that relationship and how they kind of flesh that out throughout the rest of the film is very nice to see, at least. It's a good arc for Ben Bradlee too, so it's not just Streep with the good arc. All of the acting is very good besides those two. I will say that I was just slightly disappointed, and I say slightly because it's not really a huge fault with the film as itself. It's mainly just a little disappointment from me, just expectation-wise, but it's still sort of a problem. I was a little disappointed in the big names that they kind of got. I won't say it in case you don't know, because they actually didn't show a few of the people that I recognized in the film in the trailer, so I won't say who, but there are a few people that show up and I'm like, oh my god, it's them, and I was thinking like, what are you doing here playing this supporting character? What are you gonna do? And they don't really focus on them a whole lot. Obviously they're important, it's based on a true story, it's important to include them, and for the roles that they're playing, they're good, they're not bad, they don't feel lazily acted or anything like that. It's just that for the kind of actors that they are, it feels like maybe there should have been a little bit more for them. So a few of those characters, though they have big names attached to play them, don't really feel as fleshed out as everyone else. However, Bob Odenkirk in this film, I thought he was the best as far as the supporting cast. He was really good in this film. He's got a nice arc that ties into the rest of the story. Also, Bruce Greenwood, I saw him last a month ago in Gerald's Game. He was fantastic in that, and he kind of carries on that same fantastic performance in this film. Though he's not in it as much as Gerald's Game, he is still really good here. There's a really great monologue with him talking to Streep that I was really invested in. So the acting all around is very good here. The story I was really interested in, and the direction was for the most part pretty good. Steven Spielberg, obviously, he's my favorite, I mentioned that earlier, and this film is very well directed. However, there is that first hour and 10 minutes or so where I thought that it was lacking a little bit of urgency, so there are moments where it feels like it is dragging a little bit, like any other director could have come in here. It doesn't really scream Spielberg or anything. Even the John Williams score is just kind of, it's fine. It is also during that last 30 to 40 minutes or so when the score picks up and it gets a little bit better. A very good score for John Williams. It also, as far as urgency goes, picks up, and as far as the direction and the cinematography, that also gets really good. Because as I mentioned, I thought for a while that any other director could have come in here, because even though there's a lot of good like one take kind of tracking shots, there is that kind of feeling of there's nothing really stand out about this direction so far. Like, it doesn't really feel that much like a Spielberg movie, but later on in the film it definitely does pick up in that regards. It definitely does scream Spielberg later on. So yeah, I am saying that I'm more of a fan of the last 30 to 40 minutes of this film. That being said, though, without that first hour and 10 minutes, there wouldn't be that build-up as far as what's going on in order to find the pages and get them to the Washington Post to begin to shift through them and get them out there. And I was still interested in what was going on in that first hour and 10 minutes. There are just a few scenes here and there that I felt aren't as interesting as the main story. There are certain things that I was slightly disappointed in, but overall, I think it's an important film to see at least. I think this is definitely a good film for Steven Spielberg. I'm going to give The Post a B+. I do think that this movie is a little overhyped as far as award consideration goes, because it literally had a limited release in December, so everyone thinks, oh, it's going to be amazing, let's nominate it. I don't think it's that good. However, this movie does have some really great acting, some really good direction from Spielberg, great John Williams score, some good cinematography, and the story itself wasn't boring to me. I was pretty much interested in a lot of this film for the majority, and it is worth seeing to see how they portray that last 30 to 40 minutes as far as the tension goes, when it's just, let's print the paper. So I would recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. But if you've seen The Post, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.